hi Ram, great to have you here, and in fact great to have this session on management books. Now I think one of the things that always crosses my mind, and in fact before I started kind of reading management books, is there even a category called management books? Because most people think this is a category that is extremely dry, just gives you the obvious truths. I mean, what's your feeling given the fact that you've been an entrepreneur for almost a decade, more, maybe more, right?
Yeah, about 15 years.
15 years, yeah. So how do you feel about the category itself of management books?
No, I think it's a very good question, Shishir. I have, in fact, even more radical, thought whether management is a discipline at all, and whether MBA programs are really worth whatever monies students pay for. But having said that, I'm a book lover at heart. Okay, and I love reading a range of different categories, and I read books not for the reason that it belongs to a particular category, but for the book itself. So in that sense, I think management as a category, I think definitely has relevance. But having said that, I would also think that you have to really look at it from a point of view of insight. Yeah. So it's not so much about management. For me, management category is really about insights. So I would like to invest my time for myself or for the recommendations that I make to my friends. If I really feel some of those books, deliver that kind of insight.
Yeah, totally. And in fact, for a long time, if you look at it, how to run a business or how a company operates was something that was not even a specialized field, as it were, right? I mean, this was something that, business houses got sort of built up by trial and error, right? And I think we go back to the time of when General Motors was around, and I'll come to that first book and the category that we are going to discuss, which is the concept of a corporation. And it's obviously written by the great, now called management thinker, but for me, he is just a thinker, Peter Drucker. I mean, his insights applied to not just, management, but for a whole range of fields outside of it. And in that, he really, for the first time, sort of places the role of the company as juxtaposed against the society. And what he talks about is that, in fact, the company has a great role and has a symbiotic relationship with the society that it operates in. And it gives you, therefore, a whole range of structures and, techniques by which managers and even companies can sort of look at organizing themselves. And that's why I sort of think it's, for me, remains one of the favorite books of mine in this category. And because it kind of outlines, and the interesting thing is, and which comes back to a session that we will have later in the day, is that for this, Peter Drucker was granted unfettered 3 months access to General Motors. So Alfred Sloan, who was the head of General Motors at that time, allowed him to speak to a range of General Motors employees, managers, to figure this thing out. And the insights that he built up through those interviews is put together in this book. Interestingly, Sloan didn't like the book too much, and so didn't promote it all that much. But I think this is on a concept level. I think the next level is really to execute, right? Which is, I think, where you're going to talk about.
Right. So before I talk about, execute or execution, going back to the concept of a corporation itself, yes, I think it was a kind of probably a paradigm-defining, book in that sense. A corporation as an, independent entity.
Yeah.
But if you actually look back over the last 3 or 4 decades since that was, published, I mean, in India today, we have the concept of an OPC, right? A one-person company or a one-person corporation. And I think that's not just a legal invention, in my opinion.
Okay.
It's actually a manifestation of the role of, or getting back the role of an individual in the business domain
Okay.
as playing an equally important role as a corporation itself. And in some sense, before I actually get to execution, I would like to actually talk about a book by Charles Handy,
Okay.
which was published in 2001.
Okay.
It's called The Elephant and the Flea. It was actually a book that was gifted because I was quite a big fan of Charles Handy, not as a management writer or a management guru, but as a philosopher. I think, in fact, his education and training was in philosophy, actually. And this was since I was such a big fan of Charles Handy, one of my team members actually gifted this to me on my birthday in 2001. And in some sense, it was like the last straw on a camel's back. I had been having thoughts of becoming an entrepreneur, and this book actually did it for me.
Wow.
So I actually
in a sense,
took
this is a
that
book
decision.
that changed your life.
It changed my life. Yeah. It was. I finished reading the book, and then I put in my resignation on that same day.
Wow.
And if you would allow me, Shishir, I'll just read out a quote because I'm not great at remembering words, however powerful they are. But one of the things that Charles Handy says in this book is regard this book as an encouragement to write your own script for a part in the very different world that lies ahead of us. And I couldn't find anything more powerful as a call to action. The possibility of writing your own script for the part that you play in a changing world that you don't even know what is going to change excited me tremendously. Okay. So this was really my.
I can't wait to hear about the book then.
Yeah. So I think in this book, as I said, I'd been a big fan of the Charles Handy philosophy more than management practices. But this book is really about the role of democratization of knowledge, the democratization of power of corporations. Like you rightly said, I think there was 2 or 3 decades of the corporation really acquiring almost a prime role in society because they had such enormous power,
Correct.
enormous reach, enormous access to resources, and therefore anybody who controlled the corporation really controlled a large part of the world we live in. But what this book is really about is about getting that little guy back to the center, because corporations are made of little guys like you and me, right? When I joined TCS, as I was sharing with you, just before in 91 or 92, TCS was just about 3,500 people. Now it's about 387,000 and counting. So corporations are made of all these hundreds of thousands of little people, right? And over decades, the little people were subject to the power of the corporation. So their equation with the companies and their employers were one-sided.
Absolutely.
And this book is really about an era where that is really being questioned. And today, if you really see whether you work for a large company like probably TCS like that you do, or whether somebody works for my company, which is a tech startup of 30 people, corporations can no longer, I think, afford to take their employees for granted. The employees today have far more power because of their knowledge, their insights, their experience, the worldview, and the value that companies are able to create, however large or small they may be, is largely being driven by values that individuals can create.
So let me ask you one thing. What is in this book, that really kind of sets it apart and kind of connects it to the power of the little guy, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, the title itself, I think, says a lot about it. The elephant and the flea. I mean, that's how...
He is the little guy.
The flea is the little guy, right? And the elephant is the corporation. And today, if you want to make elephants dance, you've got to have a whole lot of fleas really, buzzing and dancing. And that is really what has, I think, changed, tremendously in the world we live in today.
Okay. So, is there any particular insight from the book that you would want to share with our viewers today?
Yeah, I think the single biggest insight is actually, for me, came from the quote that I just, shared. It's about having the belief that you have as much access to the resources and knowledge as the company has, right?
Right.
And therefore, as an individual, you are able to create a script for yourself that can actually change the script for the company.
Okay.
So I think that's the single biggest, insight from this book for me.
I mean, should we now kind of move on to the other book that we've chosen to discuss today is a very, very well-known book. I mean, it's not it's not generally considered to be a management book. It's probably more of an MBA book. It's called Competitive Strategy, and that's by Michael Porter. Porter, who is a professor at Harvard Business School. And I remember when I started my career in business journalism, and I really wanted to understand, okay, when you were trying to understand a company, what do you look at? How do you determine whether this company, the things that it's doing, is right thing or the relevant things? And I found this book very useful because it's, with the power of a way to think about something, a framework as it were, and the Porter book gives you that. It comes up with something called as the 5 forces framework, right? Which is really the, competitors, bargaining power of buyers, suppliers, and that framework has held its test of time. Even today, when you look at, when you're trying to assess whether it's a good business to do or, how should you be analyzing a particular business, it's pretty much that framework that is utilized. And it gave you two very interesting insight, and I think you will probably discuss them in another book that, of the Everything Store, is that either you are differentiated or you are low cost. If you're differentiated, great, maybe you can charge higher prices for your product and you probably have a premium positioning. If you're low cost, then, people can afford you, a large number of people. But if you're somewhere in the middle, that's a difficult situation to be in, because then you are neither this nor that. And actually it was fair, and also well defined way of looking at industries after industries, which I found very useful. And even today, I think it's a great tool to be used if you are trying to assess how to compete in a particular industry.
Yeah, I think I also read the Porter's book almost within a couple of years after it was published, and it was very intellectually it was very exciting.
Yeah.
But over a period of the last 15 or 20 years, and especially I would say in the last 5 to 10 years, as I have really become more an entrepreneur, myself, I found that it has its relevance from a day-to-day, action, in terms of how you want to run your organization, most effectively, is fairly limited.
Okay.
I go back to a nice quote of Karl Marx. Philosophers interpret the world. The point, however, is to change it.
Change it.
And I come across this many, many years ago. I think probably when I was in school or something. And to me, this book is more at a philosophical level, in terms of interpreting what is happening.
Right.
But from a point of view of actually deriving some actionable insight, to me it has, limited, relevance. For example, I would, as like you rightly, said, the connection with, the Amazon and the Everything Store, which is a more recent book that I, happened to read. And I'm a big fan of Jeff Bezos in particular.
Aren't we all?
Being a tech entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And really speaking, the role model, or not the role model, the vision around Amazon probably was not there at on the day Jeff Bezos founded the company. But over a period of time, I think that's kind of evolved as the vision is to be the most customer-centric company on earth. Right. That's a very powerful vision. And to me, that actually overrides every other interpretive framework. Yes, competitors are important, your suppliers are important, your channels are important. But every company, if it has to be lastingly successful, I think has to have a very, very deep customer obsession.
Absolutely.
Right? And if you can actually create an organizational culture and a set of day-to-day practices around customer obsession, I think that to me is probably far more a recipe for lasting greatness than a kind of a strategic, high-level, conceptual strategic framework. Yeah, I'm not sure whether you agree with this thought, but that's what my
you're right in the sense that the world has become far more fluid and dynamic and much more complex for something very static maybe to take hold. But what I would say is that it remains relevant in the sense that everything that he said in the book you have to do, but you have to do it at a much faster pace. He talks about the importance of customers, absolutely, and that remains relevant. But what he says about that, let's say about being low cost, Amazon changes prices 2.5 million times a day. So you can see that it's connected, but in fact I'll let you talk about the Amazon story, because I think that's a very important book, the Everything Store.
Right, and I think it's a very interesting. I mean, like in the Porter's framework, you talk about being differentiated, or being highly price competitive, right, or cost competitive. I think Amazon is probably a new paradigm where you actually doing both very
amazing,
well. Right?
Amazing insight. Yes, right. Absolutely.
So if you look at, the Everything Store itself is about being differentiated, giving the choice to your customer, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you want to buy a category of anything, whether it's a gadget or whether it's a toy or a game or whatever. I mean, I just yesterday ordered for our nephew in the UK some nice games which we wanted it to reach him before my wife, who's actually on her way back from the US, before she reaches there. It should be there. And Amazon makes it possible, right? The choice of stuff that you want, your delivery. I'm an Amazon .in customer, but I could order that same thing from Amazon.co.uk.
So maybe the thing is that it's not either or. You got to do both. You got to do both.
So which is why I like this book. This book gave me a little bit more insights about how Amazon works and Jeff Bezos thinking. And I think there are one or two practices that we have actually implemented in our company from the book, which I think to me is I think
that's a true mark of a success.
Yeah, true mark of a great book, right?
Yeah,
if you're actually
it finds its way back into your life.
Insight and you are actually able to put it in practice, not just at an individual level, but at a company level. For example, one of the things that he talks about is disagree and day one, the day one company. Right?
Yeah.
How can you be a day one company? And translate that into a set of common practices.
Yes.
Like, for example, a concept of a two-pizza team.
Yeah.
No project in the company should be run by a team which can consume more than two pizzas. Yeah. Right? That's a great insight, or that's a great way of looking at how you want to run even the most complex projects, right? Or for example, if somebody has a proposal, the only way proposals are discussed and decided in Amazon is that the author of the proposal has to write a no more than a 6 to 7 page written note, not a PowerPoint, not a large 200-page report, a 5 to 6 page written report, because that helps the person to clarify
his
the
own
thought process behind their own proposal, right?
Fantastic.
And then it gets discussed in a meeting. Everybody spends 5 to 10 minutes reading that before they discuss.
Great.
And nobody can veto that proposal unless they have an alternative proposal. Amazing. I mean, this is an amazing practice.
Absolutely. I think our pizzas are here.
Yes, I think we should now go and
Yes,
have a
absolutely.
bite from that.
Have a bite, right? It was great talking to you, Ram.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Shishir, wonderful, and let's do this again with
Very
a few
soon,
more
very
books.
soon.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Rupak Shah, and before I start, I would like to thank Owlery Book World Show for having me out here. So I conduct velocity reading workshops where I help people to overcome the guilt of not reading books. So what is velocity reading? So it is about increasing your reading speed by 300% so that you can read faster with better understanding. And in this video, I will share 2 techniques that will help you to read faster when it comes to reading books which have difficult words, and also on how to retain that reading material. So let's start with the first tip. The first tip is known as vocab enhancer. This will help you to read faster on the books which have difficult words. Now usually what happens is we start reading a book and it contains a lot of difficult words. So constantly we need to shift towards the dictionary, find the meaning, and that breaks our flow. Or second thing what we do is we just try to get the meaning of that word by reading the entire sentence. But if you are a regular reader like me, you know that does not work always. So what to do? So it's a very simple tip. It is all about, for example, you decide that you are reading for next 30 minutes. You get approximate guess कि I might finish almost 20-25 pages. So in that, you have to first glance through those 20-25 pages, find out the difficult words and find the meaning of those words before. And then you start reading, you will never break the flow. So I repeat myself again. It is about first deciding, okay, I will finish around 20-25 pages. First, scan those pages. It will hardly take a couple of minutes. Find out the difficult words. First, find its meaning and then start reading. So once you start reading, you will never break the flow. So the tip is known as vocab enhancer. So the second tip is known as summarizer. Okay, where it will help you to summarize whatever you have read for longer period of time. Now usually what we do is, let's assume we are reading for 20 minutes. So we read till last minute and then close the book and then go to the next activity. In that, what happens is your brain does not get time to summarize the data what you have read. So the tip is very simple. If you have decided that you will read for 20 minutes, don't read new data up till 20th minute. Finish reading in somewhere around 17-18 minutes and then use the remaining 2 minutes to summarize mentally of what you have read. Yes, you can scan through the earlier pages and see what you have read so that you can summarize it effectively. And if that data has some important points, please make sure to write it, and that will help you to summarize the data for longer period of time. Remember, we forget new information in less than 48 hours. So if you are not doing something to retain it within that span, you will forget quickly of what you have read. Make sure you apply it while reading. Now, if you are watching this video till this minute, that means you believe that reading is very important aspect for your growth. If it is true, then my question to you is, when was the last time you did something to improve your reading skills? If you are like the 90% of crowd, you from let's say 7th standard, you are still reading in the same format, trying to retain the data in the same format itself. So why don't you become active, start trying to learn new techniques to increase your reading speed, comprehend better, understand better. And trust me, it is applicable not just for non-fiction books, it is also applicable for a fiction book also. So just for this people who are watching this video, I would like you to invite to my velocity reading workshop for free. Okay, come update your reading skills so that you can read 300% faster. And one of the best way to increase your knowledge is to surround yourself with the like-minded people who are reading a lot like you. So I would also like you to subscribe to this channel of Owlery Book World Show so that you will get to know about their different events. They are doing a lot of work to create the reading culture in today's society when people are going against for the reading. So please subscribe to this channel, also like their Facebook page, and hope to see you in next Owlery Book World show. Thank you.
That the children who have sort of grown up for the last 1 year listening to the same thing over and over again